This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we are joined by Keenen Stevenson of the Bridging the Gap Collective. Welcome, Keenen, to WZRD.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. First of all, Keenen, tell us a little bit about the mission of uh, Bridging the Gap Collective.
Of course. So for the context and for Bridging the Gap Collective,
Mhm.
it's really important for us to understand that equity is at the forefront in mental health. So some of the things that we really will focus on is I think about our pillars of awareness, compassion, leadership, humility, grace, and service. And so understanding that communities need support and understanding that mental health awareness is something that promotes inner peace. It's to provide a high quality service, but also understanding that people who are marginalized need that same support. And that's what Bridging the Gap Collective is to literally bridge the gap between some of the services you might get from a private practice, but also understanding the importance of one, providing people top quality care, but also understanding the diversity within the needs of people.
Is it that Bridging the Gap Collective also helps people who cannot afford mental
Mhm.
health care? And oftentimes, of course, there are many who cannot afford. So how does Bridging the Gap Collective address that?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things is that we're building, and so we're recruiting interns, and then also people from our staff provide free therapy. So I am on the board. I also provide free therapy to people who can't afford it. And so one of the things is that to remove that barrier, the people go through a process. If they meet the certain criteria, and then we're able to really match them with a therapist as we're growing and building more. That's how we're addressing no cost for people who can't afford quality health care.
You also address intergenerational trauma. Is that
Mhm.
family issues? Because if it were you, then it were family issues. It's really hard for them to even start getting therapy because they don't have the maybe necessary family support.
Mhm. Yeah, it treating intergenerational issues is very complex. I think the first thing is that as you what I think about what I would tell my clients that face that is you're going to start to notice things that didn't work, and then when you see those things not working and you push back on those ideals, it becomes hard and it's isolating. And I think that as clinicians, as therapists, anyone working with people, it's helping people to understand that although you're changing, and sometimes the people around you aren't changing because they don't see those things, it it's just really hard in all honesty, but really allowing people to understand the very fundamental thing is that as you change and grow, there's things around you that you notice aren't changing and growing. And it's not because it lacks capacity, it lacks awareness. So understanding how to help people have compassion, but also being aware that people might not be where you are and allowing them the opportunity to hopefully get there one day, but then also you not feel as isolated as you're going through the process of metamorphosis.
Mhm. And so what you're saying is that some young people uh, are not getting the support they need to grow at home, and that contributes to mental health issues, right? And then how if let's say if there were a young person who is listening now, how would they even start uh, trying to get some support and trying to understand where they are?
Yeah, I think that it might not always be people are getting the support, but it's that the support that they need, there's no expertise in the area. For example, people who are first generation college students that have not, no one in their family has either completed college or attended college or have had certain types of jobs. And so for them, one of the biggest things is one, how do I understand what's going on when systems around me don't understand? And I think it's when you recognize that feeling where something is just not right, and then but you can't put you're like, I can't really place a finger on it. That's when you start to think about and examine those things, where then you start to you find a therapist and you do therapy. And it's like, okay, I'm starting to notice these things. And so now as I'm trying to build my support, I'm understanding that the support network that I need to build might not always be my family, but might be a support network that I'm creating outside of that, where it's friends or the families that we choose, because our families are amazing, but sometimes there are gaps in their knowledge because of intergenerational trauma that they might not see yet.
Mhm. How do you help these individuals? It might not even be the youth. It might be even the other generations
Mhm.
that are having the trauma that they know that something is off, but they don't know how to put their finger on it and how to
Mhm.
resolve it. So how do those people reach support, reach help, or how do they reach the Bridging the Gap collective?
No, so I think about it just simply you can go to our website or you can go to the Juniper Center's website and you can reach out. I think one of the biggest things is our executive director, Elise. She's amazing. And so I think about it in two ways where reach out and see, and you can be directed into the right place from our company's website. But then also to go back to what you had said earlier is you have to treat people with compassion in order for them to understand something. You have to let people know that they're the expert of their life. And just because I'm a therapist or a clinician or I'm a healthcare professional, I don't know you and you're teaching me you. And I think that as a therapist, you lead with that, where a person can identify that if they're coming to therapy, they've identified that there's something that they want to address, but they like, I'm here for the experience. I'm not sure what's going to come out of it. And when you work in thought partnership with those people, you allow them to see and uncover, like, oh, this is an area of weakness for me, or this is a deficit that I have. Let me really start to address that. But it has to start with me as a clinician or any clinician allowing a person to come into the space and feel comfortable and not be judgmental and say, oh,
Mhm,
you don't know how to do this or you can't do that. And it's just like, well, let's look at the strengths and see where you are and let's maximize the strengths and then we can lean into the deficiencies in order to really treat them.
mhm. What strengths do you usually find that could help you lend them more support?
Most of the time, people are very resilient.
Hmm.
Sometimes we might not have awareness of everything that's going on in our life, but we're able to persist through everything that happens. And so resiliency is something that transcends all areas of life, no matter age, diversity, ability level. A person who continues to try is a person who obviously that's a strength in a lot of us. And I think also sometimes is foresight or honesty or candor. Sometimes we're very candid with ourselves. That's another thing that I like, where it's like, I know this is not correct, but, and it's like, and sometimes we can't get to the stuff after the but and do therapy through any type of like self improvement. That's where we start to see those things, but really just resiliency and the effort to try.
How are your patients usually refer to you? Are they like, for instance, let's say the young people, or is it school counselors? How do they even find you? Because
I think really,
go
sorry
ahead.
for cutting you off. No, I
That's okay.
think one of the things is as we're building and we're scaling up is being a staple in a community where like moments like this where you get an opportunity to talk about things, allowing people to find us through really just marketing. I think that's one of the biggest things in which we're trying to establish and do is that we're providing a service and we have something out here and we need to spread it. We need people to understand that there are people that actually really care about your mental health, and not saying that other organizations or people do not, but as we're trying to build our unique perspective and what we understand and what we know, allowing people that opportunity to find us, where just simply, what do you need? And really addressing the needs that people have, but really just building like moments like this and hopefully people are able to use word of mouth marketing to say, I heard about this, I heard about that, to really bring in more people to understand what our services offer, and then also making sure we build capacity to offer those services.
When the name says it's Bridging the Gap Collective,
Mhm.
what is the gap that we're talking about?
I think about the gap is the way our society is set up. Healthcare is access, it's privilege. And so that gap is of filling all the privileges or the lack of privilege people have. due to their healthcare. And so really being able to fill those gaps. And I think the gaps could be a multitude of things where we're bridging the gap between the connection of the person used to be and now the person you're changing into, or also bridging the gap of just understanding that there might just be literally a gap in your life and you need someone to help you process those things and then move forward so then you can go to the next phase so you can I guess, like, no pun intended, but cross the bridge as you bridge your own gap.
Mhm. When you get your when let's put it this way, uh, how accessible is mental health care for people? Or do you have any figures about how many people need mental health care
Mhm.
in the population versus how many people actually are getting mental health care?
In all transparency, I don't know the exact figures of the statistics, but I can go
Mhm.
based off of what I've seen. Is
Mhm.
that oftentimes one of the biggest barriers is when people are trying to get healthcare services is if, let's say, for example, they have a service that insurance that a provider isn't taking, and you match with a person and it's amazing, they're great, and then you can't see them because your insurance does is not covered by them. And I, unfortunately, I would, that happens quite often. That's happened to me before where I've met
Mhm.
people. It's amazing. And then a barrier such as insurance is plaguing them. And it's like, well, I have insurance and I can't necessarily pay a copay, or the copay might be super high. It could, I've seen people with and not to say I'm against insurance companies or anything, but I've seen it where copays for certain people are $120 for something. And that's just too expensive. And so really, like, those things, and I would have to say from what I've seen personally, and I don't know any other ones that counts, but I would say that at least if I had to do, if I just said five out of five, there might be 2 to 3 people that can't get access to quality healthcare or the healthcare that they need based off of insurance issues or lack thereof insurance.
Mhm. That might be very close because that's about almost 50% that of people might
Mhm.
not be able to get what healthcare that they need because even a friend of mine said that he was seeing someone that was really good, but then his insurance had to change and then he couldn't see
Mhm.
that person anymore. Uh, how about the people that are seeing a therapist for the first time? What about how do they actually know that they need a therapist? And then how um, sometimes like even in schools,
Mhm.
students don't realize that they might need a counselor. So, what is the first step that you would suggest to someone to realize that that person might need some mental health care, and then how to proceed from there?
I think that one of the biggest factors that allows you to know when you really need some support or mental health care
Mhm.
is where you feel this, it's I feel like things are bucketed in either anxiety or depression, where if I wake up and I feel anxious almost every day, I need somebody to talk to. If I wake up on a daily basis or feel just very low motivation, can't take care of personal hygiene, um, tasks such as completing assignments are very hard. I need someone to talk to process. If I feel like my executive functioning, my decision making is bad, and where I make constantly the same decisions all the time that have the same outcome, for example, like investing in interpersonal relationships that don't serve you, feeling like you have to be everything at all times to everyone, and then not taking time for yourself. It's Therapy is intimidating because you could be you're allowing a person into your life, a person that you don't know and you're trying to get to know, and then you have to spill all your secrets to them.
Mhm.
And so being able to understand that when you find the fit is finding a person that allows you to feel comfortable talking, because I tell people therapeutic is not there's a sage on the stage as a clinician or therapist and you're just telling the person how to live their life. It is truly a collaborative effort. And as people are trying to find a therapist or understand how do I need mental health support, or the moment where you just feel like I know something isn't right and I just need to address it, and it keeps happening. So like those are really ways to for people to kind of understand, especially anyone, no matter what their age, but more specifically younger audiences, because it allows them a chance to they're a little bit more reflective than I would say my generation or people maybe above me, because they have an opportunity and they have a little bit different time frame that they've grown up in. It allows them to really understand it just because of social media and internet.
How do people uh, uh, find out whether, let's say, time management, how would they be able to tell whether it's just a lack of management skills, or it's
Mhm.
depression that is causing procrastination and then bad time management? Is there any advice that you could give to people about that?
Yeah, I would think that one of the biggest things. So I'm outside of work. I tell people I'm very laissez-faire. I'm very no structure. Um, that's me outside of work, but within work, very structured. And I
Mhm.
tell people being able to either, if you have two different halves of yourself, or if you want to be more organized, one of the quickest ways to reduce anxiety is to make a list. Some people like to plan out in the future. Some people can plan their whole weeks out at a time, and some people can just plan each day out at a time. I think about is finding what's authentic for you, and whether if you reduce anxiety by making sure, like, I know when all my meetings are, I know when all these things are, I know what I'm gonna eat for dinner. I'd rather plan and overplan than be anxious.
Mhm.
And I tell people, especially anyone that if you're a person that likes to make a list, if you like, okay, I know what I need to do. I have a meeting on next Tuesday, great. But what action steps can I do to create an opportunity for me to not be as anxious? Because I think about being able to be prepared. And one of the other things that I've personally been doing, and something that I've noticed works and I've done with people, is I call it a 10-minute night. Take 10 minutes before you go to bed and set up the things that you need, whether that's if I need to iron clothes or get something prepared. So then the 10 minutes that I spend at night, somehow, I don't know if it's like some type of like loophole in like time in the space-time continuum, but I noticed that taking 10 to 15 minutes before you go to bed to prepare for the next day will save you an hour or two. And I can tell you that because I do it. And so it allows you to wake up and start the day knowing that you have all the things prepared, so that then you can really feel like you've accomplished a goal and you feel good. And also, in closing, last thing about that is I tell people one of the biggest motivational factors is a great hygiene program. I need to wake up and brush my teeth because it becomes very ritualistic, and I know that that's an easy success. I brushed my teeth today. That's an easy success. I did this for my hygiene. That's an easy success.
Mhm. When you speak about it's essential for the mind, body, and spirit to be in alignment to achieve mental acuity.
Mhm.
So, how is that? It's kind of speaks toward holistic medicine, but what do you actually mean by that in for good mental health for good mental health?
Yeah, so for me, that's a quote specifically from my profile. I think about mental acuity, and I think about we are we are beings of a lot of parts. Regardless of if you say mind, body, and spirit, someone says, "Well, I don't believe in that," but I say, "Well, mind, body, and consciousness." I think in this existence that we have, peace is the most important and the most valuable thing. And so as you start to achieve peace, and you start to be at more of like a rest state, you're able to really be mindful. And I think about it, not necessarily always the mindfulness meditation, although I believe meditation is important, but meditate in a way that is authentic to you in your schema and things that you know. But I think about that mental acuity part is being able to enjoy the simple things in life. Like, for example, we're talking right now, I can still feel the breeze blowing on my neck, and I'm being able to be present in the moment and not thinking about what's your next question or how I'm going to answer, but being able to really allow things to slow down. And as unfortunately, sometimes in America, I tell people I don't know if it's the rat race or the rat trap, but I in everything that we have to deal with is being able to find those pockets of relaxation and restoration, that and then when you're able to build it into your day instead of waiting like, oh, I work Monday through Friday, I can't wait from Friday night till Sunday morning to feel like I have a heart attack before I go to bed. I want people to be able to build those in. And so mental acuity is the continue, for my definition, the continual practice of trying to build in appropriate mental health supports so that you can always feel good instead of just waiting for a time to feel good.
Mhm. And when you are speaking of meditation, it seemed as if the 10 minute that of time when you used to plan the next day, it seems that for you, that's kind of like a meditation. That's when you empty out everything else
Mhm.
and just concentrate on that plan for the next day.
Yeah, that's part of my meditation. One of the things, I'm a big yogi. I do yoga nearly every day, and also walk. I think for me, it's low, like things are easy. I go walk for a minimum of 30 minutes, like little things like that. The intentionality of being able to focus and dump things out. For me, I like to, if I need to generate ideas, I walk. If I need to process stress a certain way, I do yoga. And having a toolkit that has multiple things. So it's like, if I don't feel like doing yoga today, I can walk. Or if I don't feel like walking, I can do yoga. If I don't feel like doing this, then I can go somewhere else. But being able to diversify your toolkit so that then you have an opportunity when something's going on and I don't feel like doing something, I can then go do something else. And so, yeah, it's really about being mindful, but the mindfulness is connecting to your schema of things. Where if for me, mindfulness is cooking, because I like to cook too, it could be looking up recipes. If it's playing basketball or baseball, it's whatever makes me feel at rest in that piece.
Speaking of yoga, there are people that practice yoga that like to do headstands. And I don't know if you do them or not, but is more blood flow to the head? Does that help to help in meditation? Does that help
Hmm.
in mental health at all?
You know, intuitively, when I answer the question, I think about like things that I do in order to like reduce anxiety. One of the things is like I invert my body, where like the headstands, there are the handstands where, or sometimes, of course, using the wall,
Mhm.
I might invert my body and put my legs, against the door frame or wall and allow that blood to trickle down. There's something about the meditative process of sometimes laying down flat. One of the things is called, I love it because I know it's the end of my practice, is called corpse pose. And so when I'm in corpse pose, I'm like, this is the end of the practice. All the stretching and tightening and all the tightening of my core that I've done throughout the day allows me that allows me to release all of that. And so I think about being able to put your body at a state of rest. I feel the benefits of being able to invert the body, especially the legs, and allow blood to recirculate or pump differently, because there's a really relaxing and calming effect. And I also think about like just breathing techniques as well. I think that whatever, because it might be different for some people. Some people say, hey, I can't stand on my hands, or I'm not getting on the ground. And it's like, okay, well, how can we breathe in order to help you receive that type of restoration and relaxation?
When your patients speak with you, and you have to gauge their background and what they
Mhm.
need. Um, uh, how long does it take? How many sessions does it take to actually understand the patient long enough in order to start helping the patient? Are you
Mhm.
able to help in the first session?
I think it kind of depends on what the person wants in the field that you get. I'm big on sending as many little evaluative tools as possible so I can know some of the stuff ahead of time. Where it's like, okay, why are you and I think one of the biggest things is like the team that we work with, they send out a general thing, or like a general little assessment, like, why are you in therapy? Why are you here? What do you need? After I meet the person, I typically find an opportunity to try to send any additional assessments based off speculations of what I perceive. For me, I'm a very solution focused person, and so for I ask people, why are you here? And I'm very transparent about it because I want to know why you're here. Because if we don't set an appropriate goal, you'll waste your time, and I don't believe in wasting people's time, because ultimately, at the end of the day, therapy is a you have clients, you have patients, you have people that are needing assistance. It's I want them to be comfortable and upfront and as transparent as possible so that then we can really do work because if you're just showing up and there, you can't address the things that are in the back of your mind that constantly plague you. So really just allowing a person to become comfortable and building that rapport. But for me, I like to provide action steps as much as possible, especially when I first meet people, because I want to make sure that one, we stay on topic because that could, sometimes we get off topic as people, but two, do it with care and like, hey, like the simple stuff when you check in with people, how are you? If people talk about their kids, ask them how their kids are doing. People ask me how my kids are doing. Um, it allows them to know that there's a human on the other side of the screen or a human in the other side of the room. Where it's just like I'm not a robot. I'm not this thing that's just here. I process information and I regurgitate answers. I am a human too, and I understand that in the human dynamic that we have to be able to build some type of camaraderie in order to work together.
When you have your your prospective patients uh, do an assessment
Mhm.
before they meet you, how accurate is the assessment? Do persons the patients understand themselves enough to do an assessment that corresponds to what you see in person?
Mhm. Yeah, I think about most of the time when people initiate their like therapeutic journey, most of the time it's out of a crisis.
Hmm.
Something has caused a trigger that has like, oh, like I have been ruminating about this thought for like 6 months now, and it's becoming invasive to the point where it's impacting my day-to-day functioning.
Hmm.
I think about so one, it's oftentimes people come in with something, um, and that's why I like the lean solution focus, where it could be, hey, I got a divorce, and for some reason, now that I've gotten a divorce or I've broken up with my partner, I have been dealing with severe loneliness, isolation, feelings of ineptitude, inadequacy. And so then, okay, we treat that. And it's like, okay, then you start to peel back the layers of the onion. For me personally, I don't start with the tell me your entire life. That's not how I operate. I start with tell me what's wrong right now, and then as we fix what's wrong in the moment, then we peel back the layers of the onions, and then we get to the core. And it's like, so now we address the core. So then, as we're addressing layer by layer, it it's so hard to be vulnerable for a person when you're pretty much you're unmasking them and asking them to undress their emotions. That's a very, very tricky situation, and it's as a clinician, you have to be able to ask a person to undress their emotions, be vulnerable within the context of understanding that you have a certain time frame and understanding, well, you can't be too vulnerable if you have to go to work because this is your lunch hour. So like being able to understand or how much can we unpack? So being able to understand all those different dynamics, allowing a person to come into that place and then helping them address the things their problem that they have immediately on hand. And then also the problem that might be a little bit more deep rooted than something that happened to them earlier in life.
Hmm. So the gap, is it usually a gap of uh, not no not a secure space, or is it a gap of just not having enough money to access mental health
Mhm,
care? I know that earlier you spoke of something being off, and then addressing that gap of
mhm.
mental security.
Um, as I'm processing, I think that the gap is a multitude of things. It could be anything, any identifiable thing that is a barrier to success.
Mhm.
So if it's location, some people can't get to certain areas, and I think that the it's amazing that telehealth has really improved that because I think about people in rural communities. Um, I work with a lot of rural communities, and access to healthcare might be difficult in the immediate vicinity because there's no service providers
Mhm.
that provide information or provide therapy or services like that. Because I work in both Indiana and Illinois, and I work with people in rural areas in Indiana. I work with people in rural areas in Illinois, and so like that gap is anything that prevents. an opportunity for change or for growth, where it could be financial, like geographic location,
Mhm.
but also time and space. Sometimes people privacy is a very big thing. So being able to make sure that the mental health is adaptable for people is important because sometimes with telehealth or teletherapy, a person sometimes they might not be able to sit down like we're having a conversation, Zoom box to Zoom box, but maybe they need to just be on the phone
Mhm.
and have that conversation, and that being okay with understanding their specific needs that they have based off of what's ever going on in their life.
Mhm. What about the stigma? Do some people reject even initiating mental health care because they think it stigmatizes them?
Yeah, the stigma is that's real. Oftentimes a person said, "Oh, I'm not crazy. I don't need therapy." And I I push back and tell people, "You do not have to be in air quotes crazy to need therapy." I think that it's such an essential thing because we oftentimes we have our people in our lives that we talk to or listen to, and sometimes we need a different perspective on problem solving, especially for things in our life. The stigma has I think the stigma has really reduced. I think about it when I was a kid, and I'm not that old. I'm in my mid 30s, and I remember the stigma of mental health in the 90s and 2000s and 20 in the 20 teens when I was in college. Um, it's different now because I think I have I'm a lot more hopeful, and as I look at generations below me, because of social media and how they prioritize mental health and access and things that you see, various like companies that are like providing helping people get access to mental health. It's amazing because now we are actually understanding that my mental health is just as important as my physical health. But I had a quote that someone told me. They said a mind is easy to lose, but hard to recover. And I think about that where I might break a leg and in 2 years or a year and a half feel great, but I might have a devastating event that has a traumatic impact on me that for some reason now I can't start a car because I'm scared that every time I start my car, I'm going to get into an accident. And so like being able to recover from those things and understanding the root cause and how to deal with fear, it really illustrates that.
Do you get many patients who are victims of crime or gun violence that need to come to you?
Um, in other capacities, yes, I have. Depending on the location.
Mm.
I used to do a lot of work in Inglewood, North and South Lawndale, especially in graduate school, and then also Little Village. And it's layered because of the various systems that impact people. I'll never forget I was working in Little Village during the pandemic, and there were so many issues on top of any form of violence that could happen. But we are dealing with a pandemic, people's loss of routine, parents, people losing jobs, and more specific to that community, um, the immigration status stuff, the internet accessibility, so many that it was so complex and layered that the trauma that produced, let alone anything that people were facing, it really had a negative impact on hopefulness. And so I think about some of the communities like Inglewood, because I used to be a teacher before I became a full time clinician, and understanding how complex PTSD or persistent trauma impacts students. Where I've had kids, I've lost students to gun violence. It's a very weird and unsettling feeling. Um, I've had kids come to me and they lost a family member or sibling to gun violence, and it's like, how do I address that and not be angry and want certain things or stuff like that? And so for me, it's hard, but yes, it oftentimes the most vulnerable populations have the least access, and because they don't have as much access, they typically are subjugated to whatever they can get. And I think that hopefully with Bridging the Gap Collective, that we provide an opportunity to not only one, help people, but also provide people a quality of care that is intentional, and we have time and capacity, because I know a lot of providers they want to do great work, but they have too much work to do.
Exactly. That's where Bridging the Gap Collective
Mhm.
comes in too, when they don't have enough clinicians, and then you have your clinicians step in to
Mhm.
assist. What about the migrant population? A lot of those are people are fleeing from uh, situations at home that might have caused a lot of
Mhm.
PTSD. So there are a lot of migrants, and then are their needs being met? Do you know?
I know of some people that's working to meet needs, but I think one of the biggest things is language barriers.
Hmm.
How many people know their dialect?
Hmm.
Like, because I know that, like, yes, people, like, for example, some people are Venezuelan, but are there words that if I'm a native Spanish speaker that they might say differently? So being able to, like, so I think about those things where language. Also, one of the hardest things is that for me is that people have escaped. They're trying to escape a a adverse situation, and they walk right into one
Hmm.
when they come here into our country because of a variety of things, political factors, support and capacity, what they thought the American dream was. I actually spoke to a Venezuelan guy. I was at Trader Joe's in Hyde Park, and he could speak English very well. But one of the things I talked to him and it was him and his son. I bought him something to eat, and he said, "If I would have known that this was the American dream, I would have never came."
Hmm.
Because I thought that they people told us that we would find something, and I'm sitting here panhandling for chips for my kids. And that broke me because I'm a parent and I understand that you do whatever you need for your children because you want them to be successful. But then I also think about, on top of people escaping like complex situations that have a lot of trauma and stress, moving across, moving to a new country, your children dealing with that stress and how that stress impacts them as well. Because I think that right now what we're seeing is you're going to see a very there's going to be a generation of kids, unfortunately, that that will struggle with certain things, with maybe attachment. These are my speculations, but it's based off qualitative and quantitative I've collected over my time period working, where they're going to have some issues with certain things because of during these formative years in their life, especially the little ones that can still remember stuff between like 4 and 10. They're going to remember displacement,
Hmm.
and it's very similar to I knew people that were displaced during Hurricane Katrina, and they still struggle with certain things even well into their adulthood because they don't build attachment to places or things because they said they could just be taken away from them.
Hmm. So that's a problem when they don't build attachments, then they don't build the foundation that they need to
Hmm.
survive adequately.
Yeah.
Hmm. So it seems as if addressing someone's mental health and helping them mental health wise
Hmm.
is not enough. They also need the resources and connections and
Yes.
actual people to step in to help. How difficult is that to bring everything in to help one person at a time?
It's difficult. I think that it's difficult, but it's not impossible. I believe in that. I oftentimes think about anything that people face in our country where people fight for something. We fight for rights. I think about civil rights. I think about just gender equality, things of that nature, people's ability to express themselves freely. It's always a fight. And I think about but it's how do we go about that, and people understanding their role. Where some people are community activists, they're going to be the ones that go out and pass out any type of things. Like I think of simple things like we provided working with an organization that do some stuff with provided toiletries because some people who are biologically female need certain toiletries
Hmm.
because they have to have that based off their biology.
Hmm.
And so, like things of that nature, like passing out deodorant, passing out food, it goes a little bit deeper because I think about a hierarchy of needs. And at the very bottom, we need safety, security, those foundational things as we build up. But if I don't have a stable place to sleep, to live, feel safe, there is no way that anything else I can achieve
Mhm.
without a cost, because there's a cost for everything, and that's inevitable. But when you want to bring in the resources, I think that one, people have to be honest, and I'm not talking about people who are the recipients of those resources. I'm talking about accountability for people who are delivering the resources,
Mhm.
because it's really important that we don't lose sight as service providers of that. This is how we're going to address this. When we need to ask people what they need, because a person, if someone asks me, Keenan, what do you need today? I'll tell you right now, I need a matcha tea latte and I need a bagel, because I'm so that's what I would need. But when you just come from a top down approach, I see this. This is what this person needs. Prime example. I used to work with kids in foster care, and I remember um, they had a Christmas drive and they were buying kids iPads and all these things. And the kids were like, yeah, that's great. This kid said, I really just want a padlock for my suitcase because people steal because I go from home to home. And they're like, I'm gonna get them an iPad. And he said, that's great. I'm gonna sell the iPad, get some other stuff, and get the padlock. And I think that oftentimes we get in that space as people who want to help, because it's like I've heard people say, well, I'm gonna get my iPad because he might not have an opportunity to get one ever. And
Mhm.
I think about that where it's like a person can get an iPad, but what the person needed was a lock.
Mhm.
And we think about it where it's just like we just want to do good, but it's like, are we doing good by people's needs? Are we doing good by a selfish need where it's like, I'm going to give you something because I can show what I'm giving you. And so I think about as a person in a position that provides something, I have to ask you what you want every time, because if I don't, then I'll just be giving you something you don't need, and it just misses the mark.
So to people, when you do ask them what they need, are they on point about what they need? Do they, or sometimes they might want something that that might not be actually what helps them the most?
I think it's a 50-50 split. Most of the time people will tell you exactly what they need, where they say I need support, and other people where they think that's what they need. It's helping them understand, okay, if this is what you need, identify why you need it. So prime
Mhm.
example, someone could say, well, I think that if, you know, I'm I want to work on my physical health. If I lose a certain amount of weight, all of my problems will go away. Then they lose all that weight. And then they find out that they have even more problems, or they still have the same problems because they haven't addressed the thing that caused the problem.
Mhm.
And then oftentimes, sadly, what happens is a person regains weight even more because losing weight didn't solve my problems. And so when
Mhm.
people have, sometimes through trial and error, we have to recognize or realize that in order to really solve my problems, I have to do two things. One, really focus on what I need to do. And if I can't focus on what I need to do, being open to feedback. And I think that's oftentimes where we can struggle as people when if everyone loves when a person says, this is what I want for dinner, this is what I'm doing, this is where I'm going, this is what I'm going to buy, and I'm leaving. And people are like, well, I know something, but I don't know everything. And I think that's a part of the journey where you help people walk through and regain their agency so that then they can feel empowered to be able to talk about stuff.
Mhm. Well, Keenen Stevenson of Bridging the Gap Collective, thank you so much for joining WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM today. And if our listeners want to learn more about Bridging the Gap Collective or want to ask you further questions, where should they go?
They should just go to the Juniper Center website, because then we can direct stuff there, because we're currently right now scaling out and building our website to be even bigger and better. And if you want to talk to me or figure out something, I tell people just Google me. I say as long as you spell my name right, it'll come up. And I'll spell my name for people. It's typically the first name Stevenson. It's very simple to spell. It's Stevenson with a V. And then my first name is Keenan. That's Keenen. Like I said, for me, I'm always open and willing to chat with people, because I know through thought partnership we can build more things and coalition build. And I have a strong feeling that oftentimes when you put the good intentionality out there, something always comes back. And I'm always open and looking to coalition build with anyone who's trying to address needs, specifically with mental health and education, and the work that we do with Bridging the Gap Collective as a whole.
Thank you so much, Keenen Stevenson of Bridging the Gap Collective and the Juniper Network.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.